Hey guys, welcome back to the Pursue Your Spark podcast. And it's me, of course, Heike. And I'm so honored and excited to have you with me on today's episode. Life is crazy right now, and it's crazy stressful with everything that's going on with the coronavirus. And we are locking down everything, our homes, our lives, and we're locking down what is important to us. I want you to stay focused. Don't get too distracted. Go day by day. Plan your day. Stay focused on what you've planned out for the day. Stick to your schedule. And in the long run, we will persevere with this virus. But as we keep going on about our lives, there's things that we encounter in our health that we don't talk about it much in public, if at all. And one of those things is IC. It's an extremely painful bladder disease. And my friend Lisa is here to teach us all about IC, what she encountered when she was diagnosed, and how she found help naturally. Hi there, you're listening to the Pursue Your Spark podcast. I'm your host and midlife warrior, Heike Yates. And on this show, we're talking about fitness, nutrition, and mindset strategies for women in midlife. Plus, our fierce guests on the show share their stories to help you reclaim your power to spark an authentic life. Today's guest is Lisa King. She's a mother, grandmother, and pharmacist of nearly 32 years. She is passionate about health and well-being with an emphasis on bladder health. Lisa teaches women with a painful bladder how to create an environment of healing and their body to move past pain and live a fulfilled life they desire. Welcome back to the show, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for having me back.
It's so awesome. I think it's over a year since we talked about tiny life changes.
Yes, it is. I was on your podcast for my book that I wrote with my sister, Tiny Life Changes. And so it's kind of full circle that I'm here today because you were one of the very first people to ask me about my own painful bladder diagnosis. So I feel it's very, very fitting that I share more about it here again on your podcast. So thank you for opening up that window for me to share about my own story.
Absolutely. But you moved just recently. I mean, my Instagram audience or my podcast audience may not know that, but you moved. You quit your job. Did I get this right?
I did. Yes. It's something that I've wanted to do. I was a pharmacist for almost 32 years and a pharmacist mom for 30 of those years. So I just felt it was really time for me to step back from the pharmacy and take care of my family. So I'm just so looking forward to doing that, spending more time with my family, which I have. But it's so funny because I find that I am busier now that I'm not working than when I was in the pharmacy. And I was thinking, how did I get that all done? It was probably on very little sleep. So I think I'm getting a lot done, but just sleeping more. So it's all good. It's exciting. We've moved into a townhouse. We've downsized. We love it here. I can walk everywhere. So I feel like even though I'm in Arizona, I feel like I'm living in New York City or California because I walk to the grocery store, to the library. So it's all good. It's all wonderful things.
This is such a game changer. We moved to our house 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. And we're in this, we sort of kind of downsized, but we just changed into a more urban location, which we can walk to everything as well. It's such a game changer.
It is. I'm loving it. I just honestly feel like even though this is a half mile from where I lived before, it's just closer in. It's not in the middle of a neighborhood. And I can't tell you how much I'm loving it. It's just wonderful. It's exciting.
I know. So let's dive into the painful bladder disease called interstitial cystitis.
Interstitial cystitis. Now, the funny thing about I wouldn't say funny, but one of the little jokes in the interstitial cystitis community is, wow, we have this painful bladder disease, and it's not only bad enough to be in so much pain, but it's a disease that nobody can even pronounce.
I've been trying to prepare, and I said, how the heck do I pronounce this?
Well, they've actually kind of changed the name to painful bladder syndrome now just because of that, but it is called interstitial cystitis, now also known as painful bladder syndrome. So that's what the exact pronunciation.
Thank you, Lisa. So what is it, and what was your experience with this chronic decision?
Well, basically, interstitial cystitis, when I was first diagnosed 25 years ago, not very much was known about it at all. But just as the name states, it's painful bladder. So it's much more than you can even imagine. So right now, it's more of an umbrella diagnosis where basically if a woman has had a painful bladder that's unexplained without urinary tract infections or any other diagnosis for more than a 6-month period, then you would have what is called interstitial cystitis. In the past, many years ago, they thought you had to have bladder ulcers. I do have ulcers. When I was first diagnosed, I did have ulcers on my bladder. So right now they're learning it's more than just having that bladder ulceration, although some women do have ulcers on their bladder, which are very hard to heal because of the environment being so moist in the bladder. But it could also be from pelvic floor dysfunction. It could be from numerous different things. And it's, as the name states, so painful. It almost feels like you have a knife sticking into your bladder or razor blades going into your bladder. It's extremely painful. And at the worst, some women are urinating 60 times a day. So you'll go through this for me, it was every 15 minutes. I would be in such extreme pain that I would have to urinate every 15 minutes. I was up all night long. And every time I would go to the bathroom, it would literally feel like a knife was being stuck in my body. And even when you're in not such a severe flare, you always just have that sensation of knowing where your bladder is, where it's aching, where right now I'm sure, you couldn't really tell us where your bladder was unless it was full. You don't really, it's like your heart or your lungs. You don't really have that feeling of knowing where it is in your body. But women who have IC just have that constant throbbing and aching and that very full sensation. So it's quite uncomfortable.
And it just starts out of the blue. Are there any signs, warning signs?
Well, most of the women that I talked to, and mine was the same way, a lot of them will start with urinary tract infections. So a lot of the times it'll be that you've had several UTIs and then your bladder becomes very irritated. Or for me, it was I would go in and start having symptoms and they would say, well, it looks like you have a urinary tract infection, but you don't have any bacteria in your urine. But we're going to go ahead and just treat it anyway. So it is now also thought to be an autoimmune disease. So a lot of times if you do have several UTIs or a UTI, your body can have that heightened immune response and then somewhat attack the bladder, causing this bladder pain. So it can start in many different ways. A lot of women have a very tight pelvic floor. There's a lot of other things involved with IC. There's something called mast cells. They're the cells that when you have something like an allergies where you're sneezing, you have runny nose, watery eyes. Women who have IC also have increased mast cells in their bladder, which can be triggered by many different things and cause these symptoms as well. So there's a lot of different things. That's why it's kind of an umbrella diagnosis now, and not every woman with IC will present the same way. So it's somewhat difficult to treat because of that.
So is it vaginal dryness that causes this as well?
Well, not necessarily vaginal dryness, although a lot of women with IC will have a lot of urethral pain. One of the big things with vaginal dryness, and we can talk a little bit about this because as many of your listeners and a lot of the women I talk to are in midlife, and vaginal dryness can also increase chances of having urinary tract infections because that vaginal dryness does not create an environment where good bacteria can thrive. So you have that environment where you have more bad bacteria than good, and then that can lead to increased chances of urinary tract infection. So it's not necessarily from vaginal dryness. I was only in my I was 28 when I was first diagnosed. There's another little thing that goes around, a saying in the IC community, is that it takes 8 years and 8 doctors before you have a diagnosis.
Oh my
God. So that was about the same for myself. My symptoms really started when I was in college, and I wasn't diagnosed till I was 28. So I was actually very thankful when I was diagnosed, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, at least I know what's wrong with me now. But then that really sets you on a whole other course, because there's so many things that you have to do when you have interstitial cystitis. One of the forefronts of treating it is the diet. So the diet is very strict diet, and we can talk a little bit about that. But the first thing that most women will get started on is the interstitial cystitis diet, which talks a lot about foods to avoid, things that are acidic, spicy, fermented, carbonated, chocolate, sugar, alcohol. It's a fairly strict diet. It used to feel like there was nothing to eat. Now I've kind of eaten this way in so many years. I do find things to eat, but it's a bit of a navigation when you first get started on what to eat.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the age that causes that, or the menopause that causes this, or perimenopause. You just get it.
Yeah, some women are just more predisposed. It is thought now to be autoimmune, so it is connected with gut health. So as you know, if you have poor gut health, if you have what they call leaky gut, you can have the toxins that are in your stomach leak out into your bloodstream, which can cause autoimmune diseases. So a lot of the women that I talk to will not only have interstitial cystitis, but they'll also have another autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's, or arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, or something else. So it goes hand in hand with a lot of other diagnoses. So there's just a lot of different things that kind of fall into play, but age is really not part of it. Most women I talk to probably are diagnosed in their 20s, but I've talked to some women who knew that they had it as teens. They were diagnosed as teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Are there more men than women affected by this condition?
There's more women, 3 to 8 million women, but a lot of these women are suffering in silence. It's something that women just don't really talk about, and the same goes for men. So if the women are suffering in silence, the men really are suffering in silence. Probably about 1 to 4 million men have this diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go around and say, I have to pee every 15 minutes, and it really hurts.
It is, and it's very embarrassing, and it creates a lot of isolation. I mean, I remember when I was diagnosed, I would barely leave the house, and I was just actually talking to someone about this yesterday. I mean, when my husband came home from work, he was in corporate sales at the time, and said, we have a sales dinner to go to. Everybody's bringing their wife. I was just thinking, oh gosh, what am I going to do? This is horrible. It was so embarrassing, because having to go to these dinners and then getting up from the table every 15 minutes, I kept thinking his colleagues were thinking, oh my gosh, what is his wife doing? Where is she going? And I'm sure he was probably quietly saying while I was at the bathroom, my wife has, a bladder condition or something, and, explaining to them, but I didn't know that. But I remember even just going to a baseball game and having to keep climbing everybody over everybody. Usually when you have IC, you never sit in the middle of the row. You sit on the end. You kind of learn all these different tricks. But sometimes if you have seats somewhere and you're stuck in the middle, it's just awful, because you're having to climb over everybody or just stand at the back. And it just creates a lot of isolation, because you don't really want to leave your house, because you're constantly having to run to the bathroom.
Yeah. So once you are diagnosed with this IC, I'm going to call it IC because I can pronounce it. So you say, first off, it's very difficult to get diagnosed, but once you are, what would you do then? What first steps would you take once you know that I got it, I have this thing, this chronic condition, now what?
Well, now that I'm the treatment right now is probably a little bit different than when I was first diagnosed. Women will start off with the interstitial cystitis diet. From there, there's different medications they can take. A lot of times, medications that are specific for overactive bladder will help a little bit, but not necessarily. It helps relieve some of the bathroom trips, but there are side effects like dry mouth and constipation. A lot of the women will have what we call pelvic floor physical therapy because they have a very tight pelvic floor. So they'll go for pelvic floor physical therapy to help loosen up that pelvic floor, learn how to do the Kegels in the proper way, just to not create more tension in the bladder floor. So that's very helpful. There's other medications. There's one medication specifically for interstitial cystitis. It's called Elmeron that they can use. Some women will have bladder installations. I used to have bladder installations where they would put medication directly into the bladder. There are numerous supplements that can be helpful. So a lot of women will start on different supplements that help ease the bladder pain. Just one, for instance, is aloe vera capsules can be helpful in helping that bladder wall become a little bit more healed and soothe the bladder. So there's a lot of different supplements that you can use. Hopefully, some of the women that I personally talk to, because they usually find me through my page, the Fulfilled Pharmacist on Instagram, also are interested in just creating a whole healthier lifestyle for themselves with healing their gut, cleaning up their diet past the interstitial cystitis diet to, reducing sugar, eating healthier foods, and just healing their body as a whole. Mm-hmm. And with that body healing and reducing inflammation in the body comes bladder healing as well.
Now, you touched on the diet a little earlier, but say it again. So once you're diagnosed, what does your diet look like? Or
it's very bland. And so a lot of people will just start eating nothing because it just seems like there's nothing to eat. So when I was first diagnosed, I thought, okay, well, I can't have, anything acidic. So there's no fruit at all except for blueberries, pears, and melon, but no cantaloupe. So I would just only stick to watermelon. So basically no fruits. I haven't had a glass of orange juice in 25 years. Nothing fermented. So no cheeses really, no yogurt, nothing like sourdough bread, nothing spicy, nothing acidic. So no vitamin C, nothing carbonated, nothing chocolate, nothing, no alcohol. So I don't really drink alcohol. So it looks like there's really nothing to eat. Mm-hmm. So I thought to myself, oh gosh, well, I'm just only going to have bread and water. I mean, that just sounds like a plan. I can't eat anything else. I'm going to have just bread and water. But that bread was, very inflammatory to the body. It didn't have any nutrients in it. So I was always tired all the time. But nowadays, like my dinner would look something like a salad with, salmon on top, or shrimp, or chicken with vegetables. And then, just a little bit of a side salad or something like that. But it's a little bit hard even navigating when you go out because you can't have vinegar. Vinegar is very acidic. So a lot of like fancy restaurants will only have vinaigrette. I usually just stick with olive oil and ranch dressing, which I just put like a tiny bit of ranch just for flavoring. And so we actually had dinner for my son's 16th birthday recently. And the restaurant we were going to, I knew only had the vinaigrette. So I wound up finding these little packets of organic ranch dressing at Sprouts. And I brought them with me, and my son's like, Mom, why are you, he's 16. Mom, why are you traveling around with ranch dressing now? But, you kind of just figure out what you have to do because there's so many things you can't eat that you figure out what you can eat. Yeah. But it can be a bit of a navigation in the beginning.
Yeah, I can see that and it's being aware of so many different things too. It's not just I'm gluten intolerant. No, it's the acids. It's this, that's the other. So that's good to know that there is something to eat because I'm assuming that's good, especially when you eat out. This is frustrating.
It can be. And the funny thing is I'm Italian. So all the foods that I was eating were everything that you shouldn't be eating, tomato sauce and sausage and, eggplant Parmesan and Parmesan cheese and all of those things were really irritating to my bladder, and I didn't realize that. And now I'm also gluten and dairy free by choice on top of this icy diet. So it really makes managing things a little bit trickier. And a lot of women will also go dairy and gluten free just because it really just is helpful for gut health and reducing that inflammation in the body. But the big thing that I also talk to women about is just some sneaky things that can come in. I remember once my bladder getting really irritated by just drinking a hint water that had a little bit of a hint of watermelon in it, because I thought, oh, I can have watermelon. Well, I didn't realize that particular drink was super high in vitamin C and had citric acid in it. So vitamin C is very irritating to the bladder because it's acidic. So you really have to read labels. I was just brought to my attention and I didn't realize it because the one that I use doesn't have it, but a lot of bone broths have apple cider vinegar in them. So, I shared that in my Facebook community to really make sure, even if you're buying bone broth, which is a healthy thing, look at the back of the label, because I did have a lady recently who had a lot of flares due to apple cider vinegar, and a lot of bone broths will have the apple cider vinegar in there to help bring out that bone marrow. So you just have to really read labels on everything.
Oh, I'm glad I read my label on my bone broth, because I was like, no, I don't think mine had that, because I take bone broth for my gut because I do have leaky gut. Mm-hmm. And so I do read the labels very closely too. But how important is it in general to read labels, and what should you look for or to avoid, other than what you just mentioned, to ease the symptoms?
Well, basically, you would look for having citric acid in there, ascorbic acid, high levels of vitamin C. So the really frustrating thing, I think, when it comes to having interstitial cystitis is that so many of the things that are good for you are bad for you when you have IC. So drinks like kombucha, yogurt, things that are fermented, they always say, don't take a probiotic, use the real thing, take foods that are fermented instead. You can't have fermented foods. Mm-hmm. So you can't have anything like that. Just even anything that's high in vitamin C. So greens, a lot of the green drinks can't have. Even as far as supplements, most multiple vitamins will have vitamin C in them. So even when I was pregnant, I had to take everything separately with my last son. I took folic acid and vitamin B, take things separately. So I always tell people, you really have to look at what's in even your supplements, because a lot of them may have vitamin C or citric acid. I even had a lady who had gone to someone specifically to help her bladder who is knowledgeable about supplements, but some of the things that are good for overall bladder health, you can't use with IC. So some of her things even had hops in them, which I believe is like a fermented something that hops they used to make beer. Yeah, for beer. Yeah, exactly. So, but that was really irritating to her bladder. So you just have to be very, very cautious about what people recommend to you, because, an overall healthy bladder supplement usually is high in vitamin C. Mm-hmm. But that's not good for someone who has IC. So you have to just be careful with that.
Yeah, so after a while what the list is of the things to avoid.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask, because we're talking about supplementation and prevention, what about UTIs? Because I know many women, especially in menopause, get UTIs, and not IC, but they started with UTIs. Is there a natural prevention or a way to prevent UTIs?
Yes, there is. And I talk about this a lot. Now, I really love D-mannose. So I know when women who are getting a urinary tract infection or have a urinary tract infection, they say to take cranberry juice. But a lot of times cranberry can be very irritating to the bladder, especially if you have a UTI. And this list of foods, honestly, will help women who also have overactive bladder, who've had a lot of urinary tract infections and their bladder may still be a little bit irritated. But D-mannose is the natural sugar that's in cranberries and in other fruits. And what it does, it provides a preferred surface for bacteria to adhere to when you take the D-mannose, and it just comes out of your body while you're urinating, as opposed to sticking to your bladder wall and creating an infection. So that's one big thing I really recommend daily. I take D-mannose daily, even though I don't really get urinary tract infections. It's just a great way to prevent them. Stay hydrated. Hydration is really good just to get that bacteria out of your body so it doesn't build up. Urinate about every 4 hours, so there's no prize for holding it a really long time. 4 hours is about the time that it will take for bacteria to head up your urethra. So I always say urinate every 4 hours. Use proper hygiene after sexual intercourse. That's a really big one. Void afterwards. Proper wiping, proper hygiene. Few more other tips I've got for you. Reduce sugar in the diet. So basically, sugar is a food for bacteria. So especially if you're prone to UTIs, you may want to really look at reducing sugar. I always say that I recommend 25 grams of sugar per day, which is the American Heart Association recommendation. It's a very generous number. And I find that if you start with that 25 grams a day, you'll naturally even decrease from there. But I have even talked to women who were vegetarian or vegan, and their diet was higher in fruits versus vegetables. And they were prone to getting UTIs, and they were getting a lot of them. And I just told them, really take a look at that sugar, because even though fruit is natural sugar, it's still sugar. So when they made that switch over to having more vegetables versus more fruits, it seemed to help quite a bit. So I would definitely take a look at sugar. And one last but not least, take a probiotic daily. So a probiotic really helps boost your immune system. It's good for that gut health and provides that good bacteria to your body, so the bad bacteria don't build up and cause infection, including urinary tract infection. So those are just some natural ways to prevent UTIs, especially in midlife. And then also the vaginal dryness that we talked about earlier. And there are some great things naturally that you can use for vaginal dryness. So I would do that as well.
Yeah, because when I think about all the good things you just mentioned, it's like they're right on point with what I hear everybody that is willing to talk about it says. I'm like, once I reduced my sugar intake, wherever it came from, I never heard of D-mannose. So is that over the counter?
Yeah, it's over the counter. The one that I use, I get online. But yeah, it's the letter D and then mannose, M-A-N-N-O-S-E. So it's D-mannose. It's the natural sugar that's in cranberries, but it's not absorbed by the body. So a lot of times people who are decreasing their sugar intake will say, oh, I don't want to have another sugar, but this is not absorbed by the body. It does not cause that sugar spike. It's just basically something for the bacteria to adhere to so you can urinate them out.
Yeah. Are you a fan of a combination of a pre and a probiotic, or would you recommend probiotics only?
Oh, I definitely recommend prebiotics too. That's actually a health trend I heard for 2020 is learn that people are becoming more aware of prebiotics. So yes, definitely prebiotics, whether you can have a natural prebiotic. I know some of the things that are prebiotics, I think leeks and onions, things like that are not, I think a banana also they recommend are not part of the interstitial cystitis diet, but I know nowadays you can find probiotics that have prebiotics in them, which is a really good thing.
Yeah, I started taking those because I found more benefit of doing the combination, but I can do the kombucha. So I'm between my bone broth and my kombucha, and then doing the best I can for my gut.
Yes, it all helps. It really all just plays together. The healthier your gut, the better your mood, the better your immune system. It prevents disease. It's just great for overall. Yeah. Gut health is everything.
In your IC community, when you're talking, and you touched on this a little earlier about going to the game, what is the emotional, should I say this, the emotional level or the emotional shame that this brings? Or how about also going a little deeper and, we all want to have sex with our partner, and then you have this condition. What's going on there?
It's really hard. I would honestly say the two things that women mostly want to talk to me about is, aside from the diet, is also, sexual intimacy, because it's extremely painful. And even you just feel like you're not a part of your family. It's just horrible. You feel like you're not participating at work. I remember having one really bad day, and luckily I was in an environment where everybody knew that I had IC. They were very kind to me where I worked, but I was literally in the bathroom every 15 minutes at work. Luckily I worked through all of this, but a lot of women can't work, and you just feel like you're not a good wife. You're not maybe able to go to that business dinner. I mean, when my boys were playing baseball, especially at some points where I was really bad, and they were little and I was afraid they might get hit in the head with the ball or something, I would always have to have another family member with me, whether it be my mom or my mother-in-law or my husband, someone there. And half the time I was in the bathroom, so I'd come out and then the kids would be saying, "Mom, did you see me hit that ball?" And I'd say, "Oh, of course I did." But you feel like you're a bad mom. It's really horrible. And I remember even once having to tell the coach, and I feel, because now I'm in my 50s, I don't think I'd be so embarrassed about this, but when you're in your 20s, you're fairly embarrassed. But they were having a mother-son baseball game. And I don't think I've ever shared this story anywhere, but they said, you got to play in the baseball game with your son. And I just thought, run the bases. First of all, I could barely walk. Every time I took a step, I would feel my bladder shake. That's how I became more of a yoga Pilates girl, because you can exercise standing in one spot. But I mean, there was just no way I would even be able to participate in this game at all. And I had to tell the coach, I can't do this. Explain to him, I sat there watching all the other moms participate. I don't even know who participated for me. Might have been my husband filling in as the only man. But there's just so many things that you can't do. Even, sitting through a wedding or a graduation ceremony. I had posted when my middle son just got married. It was a really big deal for me to be able to sit through the ceremony, to dance on the dance floor. I remember going to weddings in the past and, sitting in the back, in the very back at the end, and having to run out mid-ceremony, not even being able to sit through a whole ceremony or a whole graduation or a whole recital. So you just really feel like you're missing out on life. So you have to really stay strong in your mindset. And that's what I do with these women, to help them keep moving forward in their healing journey and know that they can heal. And just keep moving forward without that shame and frustration, because it can be extremely frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Are there any support groups?
There's a lot of support groups, but, honestly, I find that even though there's so much support online that you can find through Facebook and through other communities, a lot of times when women are first diagnosed and join these groups, it becomes very scary for them, because there are other women in there who have been diagnosed, for over 20, 25 years like myself, but who aren't healed, who have not found that relief. And they think to themselves, oh my gosh, is this going to be me? Am I going to be 20 years from now in this extreme amount of pain? And, while my heart just goes out to those women who have been in this pain for 20 years, that's not everyone. And I did read somewhere online that one of the reasons that a lot of women don't realize that other women do heal from IC is because it's so horrible while you're going through it. Once you put it in your past, you kind of want to put it in your past. You don't want to talk about it anymore. Absolutely. And so you have to kind of find the women who have healed. And so I know several women that I, collaborate with and talk to all the time in the IC community who have been able to move on and heal their bladder. So those are the kind of women that you want to identify with. And so while the support groups are great, the name of my bladder pain community on Facebook is the Bladder Pain Wellness Community. So I really like to just share in there tips on, staying healthy, mindset tips, and just to always keep moving forward in that healing, as opposed to talking about how much pain we're in. And women are in pain. And like I said, my heart goes out to them, but I don't want other women to become scared by that. I want everybody to just keep moving forward in wherever they are in their journey.
I think that's great advice. Yep. Mm-hmm. Looking forward rather than back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lisa, what are 3 tips that you would like to share with women that are dealing with bladder pain?
The first thing is just self-care. I can't stress that enough. I mean, just even if you have to tell your family member, I'm in pain right now and I'm doing everything I can to heal my body. So that takes a lot of energy. And so really, I feel like my healing, my turning point in my own healing was when I started doing a healing meditation every day and taking time for meditation and self-care. So the biggest thing I would say is self-care, taking care of yourself, getting proper sleep, whatever you need to do, just do it. If you need to take a warm bath, use a hot water bottle, take a baking soda bath, baking soda and water, drink that. Whatever you need to do, just do what you need to do to heal and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Now, Lisa, how can people reach you and learn more about you?
I am on Facebook and Instagram, but mostly Instagram as The Fulfilled Pharmacist. I also have a website that is called ditchbladderpain.com. And if you go to ditchbladderpain.com, you can also download my free 35-page report on 5 simple ways to ditch bladder pain. There's a lot in there about the interstitial cystitis diet, also the exact meditation that I used when I was healing my own bladder. It's a great download, not only for women with IC, but women who have an overactive bladder. And that's very common in midlife, over 30 million women with overactive bladder. So some of these foods are foods to avoid for overactive bladder as well. Or if you have recurrent UTIs, you may want to avoid them. If you are a medical professional, I also suggest, like myself, a pharmacist, to download the report. Just would be very helpful for you while you're sharing with your patients who may have some of these issues. So you can find the free report also at ditchbladderpain.com.
That's awesome. And all the links will be in the show notes for you guys. So all you have to do is click and talk to Lisa, get your free report, and join the group if that's applicable for you, and reach out and join Lisa on the Fulfilled Pharmacist on Instagram. And thank you so much for being here, Lisa. It was so good to have you back on the show and sharing this really important topic with my audience.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share this. I know there's so many women suffering in silence. And so anything I can do to bring hope to these women, that's really my passion. Thank you, Heike.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, this was an eye-opening episode, don't you think? Who knew that you can do so much about the IC, UTIs, vaginal dryness, and ditch bladder pain naturally? Lisa is just a wealth of knowledge. So make sure you get her report, and all the links will be in the show note. And I'll see you next time on the Pursue Your Spark podcast. I hope you have an amazing day, and thank you so much for being here.